You know, when you think about superstars, there truly was none bigger. And these particular doors here behind me really did welcome, well, not just superstars of a swinging era, but royalty superstars too. Now, here today, we're in the very heart of London, Kensington High Street. Most people would really associate this particular area of London with the late and beautiful Princess Diana. After all, in the 1980s, it was a Sloane Ranger emporium, wasn't it? But at Stratford Court here, on many occasions and many times without bodyguards, a senior member of the British monarchy would come down quite simply to party with all the big people of the day, including the Beatles, Lionel Bart, Lionel Blair, Sir Roger Moore, you name it, everybody went through those doors for a party at a 1950 singer who quite simply became a huge icon. As ever, let me explain. 50s superstar Alma Cogan was quite literally one of the biggest names in show business within the 1950s. In fact, she was a firm favourite with the British monarchy from 1955 when she was asked to appear in front of Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh for the very first time that the Royal Variety performance was taken out of London and up to Blackpool, the most famous seaside resort of that particular era. Alma, of course, was absolutely thrilled. And let's not forget, she was still a very young girl in her early 20s. But it was here in Kensington High Street that, well, many people said her career quite literally took off because she was known for having open house parties. Nothing salacious, I might add, but simply the fact that, everybody who was anybody knew Alma. She was that popular on the circuit. Now, for those of us who are not aware of Alma Cogan's legacy, she had a spectacular success with her own TV series and part of a hugely successful radio series, Take It From Here, mega hit records like Pocket Transistor and Never Do a Tango with an Eskimo. A little bit of novelty songs, but nonetheless very, very well loved at that particular era. In fact, she was almost a British jukebox queen, ahead, of course, of other girls like Sandy Shaw, Cilla Black, and Dusty Springfield. It was through these doors at Stratford Court that all the mega stars of the day literally walked, including Mick Jagger, the Beatles, Lionel Bart, just ahead of his mega success, of course, with the musical Oliver. But it was one senior member of the British monarchy that truly loved her nights out at Stratford Court in the company of many of the other stars from which Alma could basically claim to be friends with. We're talking about the late and beautiful, Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret. Now, she thoroughly enjoyed nights out here, so much so she would dismiss her own protection officers and walk back to Kensington Palace, which is literally about a 10-minute walk away, so that she wasn't disturbed or indeed reported on. Alma Cogan was sort of a good friend to Princess Margaret because Alma herself was a very good listener, took on everybody's problems, a bit of a mother figure. And Princess Margaret had many, as we know, ups and downs in a rather checkered love life. Now, it was interesting to note because as Lionel Blair, who was also a frequenter at many parties here, said, you did sometimes forget that Princess Margaret was the Queen's sister. It got a little bit raucous, a little bit noisy, and sometimes a little bit out of hand. But Alma was a consummate hostess. Many times her mother was providing tea, coffee, and sandwiches. And it was in this flat that the Beatles, Sir Paul McCartney, played the very first incarnation of what was to become a mega hit for the Beatles, Yesterday. Now, so much so that Sir Paul was quite keen on Alma recording it because he was unsure about whether it could be a hit or not. Now, John Lennon became very, very close to Alma Cogan, so much so that even his wife, Cynthia Lennon, claimed that John was secretly in love with Alma. Such was her magnetism. Sadly, though, for Alma, her career derailed in the early 1960s, and she tried to get it back on track by recording said Beatles songs, and at times with certain members of the Beatles playing backing tracks, tambourine, that sort of thing, without any musical credit. Sadly, though, for Alma, things were not to pan out incredibly well. And sadly, she lost her battle with ovarian cancer at the very early age of 34 in 1966. John Lennon apparently was devastated, as was Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret, simply because she'd lost a very close friend but more importantly knew that Alma had retained a lot of her secrets, girl chats, that sort of thing. So it's interesting to note, as I often say here in the very heart of London, when you're wandering around and you kind of think, what went on through those doors? Now, still people live here in Stratford Court. And of course, I bet you they have no idea of the megastars from the likes of Noel Coward, Judy Garland, and of course, Sean Connery. Anybody who was anybody came to these flats simply because Alma's door was permanently open. She was always ready for a chat, a giggle, and a laugh. But more importantly, her mother was also ready with tea and sympathy. And celebrities knew that if they came here, if it was for a party or for a simple one-to-one, then everything, they could rest assured, was to remain private. If you haven't checked out Alma Cogan's legacy yet, do give it a look. She was a girl of a certain time, and sadly, unlike the likes of Cilla, Dusty and Sandy, seems to have been forgotten. But she was a huge talent, and as ever, deserves to be remembered. Neil Sean, Kensington High Street, in the very heart of London.